How are you, Darryl? So when are you going to Tassie?
Tuesday. If I get out of the concreting.
Yeah. Well, where have you parked your car?
My car's outside.
Because I guess that you can come from the back paddock, right?
Well, they said you can go through non-paddock. Yeah, there's only one way.
It's only one way. It's actually quite good.
And it has a thing that you can like move the shutters up, move the shutters down. Wow. You know, and like it has that can be this big and it has lights so to speak. And I was like, oh, I think I'm like, you know.
So there's no bounce.
No.
All right, so we'll start with the Hot Sutra. Do you need help? Gotcha. All right, no, I can come and give you a hand. All right, anyway. I prostrated the eye of triple gem. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on massive Vajra mountains in Rajgira, together with a great community of monks and a great community of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition, factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristics. Unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition, factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element and so on up to including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extension of ignorance and so on up to including no aging and death and no extension of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on the dwelling perfection of wisdom. the man without obscuration and without fear, having completely passed beyond error to reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to the unsurpassable and perfect complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of the great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisattva. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration, commending the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. I prostrated the gathering of the kidneys in the three chakras to abide in the holy yoga of using space by a powerful magical illuminations. Look after practitioners like Mother Hassan. Akasamarata Shadava Samarayampi. Akasamarata Shadava Samarayampi. Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisattva. By the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed, may they be disturbed, may they be pacified. Shinto Korin Soha. May all negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May they be separated from problems and harmful conditions to the Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma. May there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here and right now. Sashi Perki Joshi Meto Tamri Ravishi Nidegapari Sangye Shindu Niteowa Ito Kunanda Shilachupashu Idam Burudana Mandala Kanyatayami Sanji Cholam Toki Chonam La Chancho Baru Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Chishi Gide Toma Dola Penche Sange Dupasho Sanji Cholam Toki Chonam La Chancho Baru Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Chishi Gide Toma Dola Penche Sange Dupasho Sanji Chodam Soji Chonam La Chancho Badu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Shushi Gibe Toma Dola Penche Sanje Rupa Sho Kangi Tuzi Nizome Tawa Tamje Pambi Chere Pambi Chunde Kadam Jera Chamse Morning. So we have tea, coffee. Can be So we've started with the Untitled Chapter in Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, and we're going to continue today with verse 2. So just let's look at where we are in terms of the outline. Just a sec. Let's find the outline. There it is. So in the way to train in joyous perseverance or joyous effort, we started with point B, how to undertake joyous perseverance. And the first point was that we started to look at is abandoning that which is incongruous with joyous effort. Following that, we will look at what is conducive to joyous effort and how to gather the factors that are conducive with it. But first off, let's look at what is incompatible with joyous effort. So the last 3 lines in verse number 2 identify what the classes of things which are incongruous with joyous perseverance or joyous effort. Let's look at this verse. It says, its discordant classes should be explained by laziness, adherence to what is negative, and despising oneself out of despondency.
That Zongju Givalaya, Zongju Mintu Chok Seguin, Mintu Chok Harres, that Zongju Mintu Chopi, and then Lelo Res, Lelo Tian, Kanshina, and Jevena, Zongju Mintu Chok Shevacho, Kanshina, Lutan, Yit Lesumron, Yongi Devala Shimbi Lelo Tang, Chawang Yambala Shambatan, Gewadribal Yin Lugni, Nim Yam de. Daniel Nibos, that the number sumti, the number sumti.
In identifying the things which are incongruous with joyous effort, basically it's laziness. And when the types of laziness are identified by the text, it refers to 3 types of laziness. As Gerda Marinchin's commentary says, and we're going to read through that. I should explain the antithesis of laziness. There is, first of the laziness that graspeth the happiness of lazing around, where body and mind are non-pliant. The laziness that graspeth the negative, and the laziness that puts oneself down thinking, I cannot do this, after having become discouraged.
Lelo number sumtita, and it's Zongju Mindu Choina, Zongju Gavalian, Gagin Chigavan, that the Kandachi Pongo race, Tavlam Kandachi Tom, the Lelo number sum, Sego race, the Cheterpon Sums.
Since these forms of laziness are adverse conditions for initiating joyous effort, undertaking joyous effort, Shantideva goes next and explains the way to rid oneself of these types of laziness. So in order to then rid ourselves of laziness, Shantideva looks at 3 points in the outline. First off, abandoning laziness by reflecting on the disadvantages of it in this life. Then he will explain abandoning laziness by reflecting on the disadvantages of it in future lives. And then Just a second. Sorry, there are actually 2 points in that section, not 3. I'm confused. So there are 2 points, right? So abandoning laziness by reflecting on the disadvantages of it in this life, and abandoning laziness by reflecting on the disadvantages of it in future lives.
Teta tambo nyumle la ronyowi lelo pambala. Nyumle la ronyowi lelo pambala means lelu gyut taune pambatan chetar pombutsu. Tambo lelu gyut taune pambani lelo kiwi gyukhardes. Lelo number song nang tambo nyumle la ani chabi dewa nyumle lelo di gyukhardes lang. Tsawe namole ya nyumle dewi ronyantang nila tembi sebayi koyo dunga mukyo le lelo niwa kiwa gyus.
When we begin with abandoning laziness by reflecting on the disadvantages of it in this life, there are 3 points. Explaining by means of an analogy that death will soon cause this body to perish. Then, as even you yourself are under the dominion of death, it is inappropriate to carry on as if you had time. Final point is you will be tormented by suffering if you do not make perseverance in virtue. Let's begin with explaining it by means of an analogy that death will soon cause this body to perish. And there are 2. I don't know what's happening to my mind. I think that it's kind of a bit foggy today. Should have read from this examining the causes of laziness and abandoning them. Sorry, let's first of all look at that. So examining the causes of laziness and abandoning them, you might wonder first off, what are the causes that give rise to laziness? If you understand the causes that give rise to laziness, you'll be able then to abandon laziness. So verse 3 says, because of relishing the pleasurable taste of indolence and craving based on sleep, from not being disillusioned with the suffering of cyclic existence, laziness grows very strong. So the first type of laziness that is dealt with in this section is laziness of indolence, so laziness of being idle, relishing the pleasure of lying down and so forth.
Nyomlegi devi ronyambatang nilete seba kowe dumala ya kyo mishibi kanji kowe dungal ani sam mishibi ani momba sumle teni ani legotivis.
As the first type of laziness that is being dealt with in this section is laziness of indolence. Here Shantideva says that there are 3 causes for that laziness. The first one is relishing the taste of pleasure, happiness or pleasure. That's the first cause of laziness, of being idle. The second one is that you crave sleep. The third one is that you are not disenchanted with the suffering of samsara. And because of that, laziness is easily produced. So it says here in verse 3, because of relishing the pleasurable taste of indolence and craving based on sleep, from not being disillusioned with the suffering of cyclic existence, laziness grows very strong.
Ani nega pigi sem yang ye pena ani nyozela soba seni anji sem chunanji tola ya ani chawli ani di dewa jila ya munze chine the dinji jila ya chan dewa ina ani ngoni ye dunga setu yagi 타금 지요마로스 로 인디질에 찬데반다 뇽리 데베 론용바세디 데리저즈레 코야리 고는 디고스레스.
So the first type of laziness of indolence is the one that relishes pleasure. Now, the way that it is expressed in Tibetan is indicating or alluding to the fact that you might engage with some forms of behavior that give you some pleasure, but these activities that give you pleasure are activities that pull you down. Like, for example, suppose that your mind is unhappy. Your mind is very unhappy and you resort to using intoxicants that for the time being confuse your mind or they disturb your mind, and you think that that gives me some relief. It gives me the pleasure or respite for my state of unhappiness. So relishing the taste of respite, relishing the taste of pleasure that you get from that is considered to be laziness of indolence, which is associated with those types of activities that pull us down.
Niba dita nila demi sevasan da chikpiya nikuya ya nikuya pe kibu shujla ya munze chichine di khorang le chani ani ni kyang ni deba na an se chima da chik tawa thamji ji khombo pha shan chik ani metse dige an thandai na ta drama tunis ta metsami gi ta jilu thedo chik chagros ra seba tindi jwana di level ki video so chik.
Now, the second type of laziness in that list is the one that is a type of craving that is based on sleep. So if you have an excessive craving for sleep, let alone not being able to accomplish the state of liberation or the state of enlightenment, even in this life, you will be lagging behind.
Dungar yimbatan and delia and kyo gomashibi any one he lelo chikigores lelo kanji chela jubigi gota masuna kangi any tangbo di be that dungham and medabigi netsu some mashibi any Chivalaya Tramashi, Dunga, and Covid Dungalaya, the Yikyo machine Digi, Ongi, and Lelo Legris, Kanji Shell Jubalaya, and Shell Jubalaya, Troa Mayochik. Chagwaza, and Leloris.
Now, the third one is not being able to get your head around what is samsaric suffering, and therefore not being disenchanted or disillusioned with that. So this is the one that is really crucial for us because it has to do with not engaging the gateway or not entering through the gateway of the Dhamma. The gateway for engaging with the Dhamma is the understanding of suffering and the development of fear of not only suffering, but also impermanence. So when we do not fear our upcoming death, when we do not fear the suffering of cyclic existence, we have no incentive, so to speak, to engage with the Dhamma. We don't have any enthusiasm or delight in engaging the Dhamma because of a lack of fear of suffering and death.
That the good is some the denny, that's all the day, that good is some the denny, young Lilia, any devil so figure that Nilia, any sever shukchamukia, COVID dungar, Lea, Gyoat Gomishiba, Kanji Madabin Netsu, some Mishibi. These some the denny, Lego Tambuti, Nyomlela Ronyo Lego said, Nyomlela Ronyo Lego. That Dimena, then be Nyomlela ya, 아니 로ኞ야 마토비기 텔레타지 아니 대왕 문진 지신기 요마라스다 제 맛이나 다 다가라네 차대지 용거로 와서라
So altogether, we looked at 3 things that give rise to laziness of just being idle. First of all, is relishing the taste of pleasure. Then having an excessive attachment to sleep. And finally, not being disenchanted with samsara, not being disenchanted with our state of impermanence. And because of that, you relish that pleasure of being indolence, which means that another way of putting it, if we go to the bottom line, you're satisfied with whatever pleasure you get at the moment, and you don't really think that there is something higher than that there could be pleasure or happiness that is better than just being attached to sleep, or the pleasure that you get in cyclic existence, not being able to recognize something that is higher. You still remain with laziness of indolence.
제 간선다 감들 레로다 종주의 레로스 라운디 종주의 레로스 라운디 비다 시샤사도디 라 안주 드비샤치레 시샤치니 드비샤 미유 드비샤 소니 아니 텔라야 주비칼이야 되니 레로다 종주스 탑텔이야 탑칼이야 더 저비칼이야 다 레로다 종주스 시기연자 디 드비샤 쪼디 카레스 라운디 아니 타와드 탐지기 공부한디 아니 드비자 쪼드레스 다 텔라야 주발야 트로와 메비기 셈바지 총바이나 디 레로레스 라 텔라야 주발야 트로비 삼바디 아니 첼레징 셈조스난다 텔라 주발야 트로비 삼바디 아니 종주샤고 바스라.
Which means that altogether, when we look at laziness and joyous effort, we need to look at it too in relation to what is to be accomplished. In relation to what can be accomplished, the state of liberation or the state of enlightenment, we can discuss laziness or joyous effort. If you feel unenthused about accomplishing liberation or accomplishing the state of omniscience, it is called laziness. If you feel enthused about liberation or enlightenment, that's joyous effort.
that can be me tadu juja tadu di tawa tamji give komba zing mebaimas ra se di anchi ani kanga mantreva cham ki leya dindi chamle me gi yabana and di lelo shabaina mending it chagdas ra kanji me yu ji toni ani keva chebaina testi ngana pembado jindusra.
So then when we develop our understanding of what constitutes laziness, if you think that laziness is just not being too concerned about the final object of accomplishment, the state of liberation or the state of omniscience, and you're just consumed with resolving issues and problems that belong to this life, it's insufficient in some sense to understand what laziness is. If you look at it in terms of what is to be accomplished, what is to be accomplished is the state of liberation or the state of omniscience. If you're unenthused about it, if you do not delight in initiating the steps or the process by which you will emerge from cyclic existence or attain the state of enlightenment, it means that you're lazy. That's not being enthused is the meaning of laziness here. That's the way that Geshe understands it.
아니 단단 안속이 타와드 탐지 김이 공방스 라운디 탈비 공방스 라운디다 동할리 탈비 아니 탈비 공방스 다 동할리 탈고야디 가르스나 동할리 탈고야 가르스나 아니 심진 참말로 좀 저르도 용스 저버디 동할리 탄득 상로지마도 동할다 탄득 상로지마도 동할다 데는 삼비기 Soundly, Yomaras, Devada Dana Sambada, Dunga the Ten Sambadi, Gonzula Chikuri Yovenza, that Dunga the Ten Sambi, some Lugi, that Wonder Dunga the Travaji, Yomari Sadi, and Gonzula Tivarelas, that D Yovana and Tanjiki Lelo Lea, and Lelo Pomikalea, and Gulatan Lelopon Son Nanshi, Dunga the Traji Yot Mesadi, Xiaondi, Dunga Gulatan, and Dunga the Traji Tagonza, that Dunga can enjoy Gumusondi, Gut Zodi, Pigi, and Nimutoso, Chadam Mosum Tony, and Dunga Yunguyoba, Tinjile and Munzin, the D Chadam Mosum, and Sepi Sechatelia, and gave us love. Ro, Tentambi gave a di, Chadam Mosum, Pachat Jeva Sepi Sebadi, and gave a race. That Delaya and Jubalaya, Troadi, and morning soon to teach us.
Gaudila di Sebegeva.
Sepi Seja.
Sebeseja.
Tarvadra, the Tarvadra.
So we spoke of liberation. What we mean by saying liberation is liberation from suffering. So all sentient beings that belong to the 6 realms of existence, all of them have the wish to not experience suffering or pain. They have that basic intention not to experience pain. All of us think, may I be free from suffering. May I be happy. May I be well. May I be free from suffering and pain. So do we all have the wish to be free from pain, to be free from suffering, and to be well? Since we all have that wish, we can recognize that we all have that wish. Then we can think of what laziness in relation to that. And what is the origin of that laziness? Like, for example, if we think of wanting to be free from suffering and pain and wishing to be happy, wanting to attain the state of liberation, then one of the questions that comes up in our mind is it possible for us to be free from suffering? Is it possible? To be free from suffering, you need to be free from the causes of suffering. And the cause of suffering are anger, attachment, and ignorance. So is it possible for us to eliminate anger, attachment, and ignorance? The elimination of the causes of suffering, anger, attachment, and ignorance is possible. And when you see that it is a tenable state, the elimination, that is a complete exhaustion of the causes of suffering, the 3 poisons of affliction, this is what you recognize as liberation. And since that separation of freedom from these afflictive states of mind is possible, then liberation is also possible.
Yeah, Dinza Bena Omanjuba Namjung as a plant there, Tambunga Shedava Shinkic, David the Shimo, the Chaki, or Sunchich and the Ram, brother Ninji, tell them to Sona Shingi, Ani Pigilia Mariba, Danzim Mariba, Maribi Wangi, and Chapi Wangi, Dama, and Delatenita, Leda Mudrasani, any Pigita, any Yanian, any Dumalaya. Kanji and Gerda, it should be the Mashibi Wangi, and Legogi Yoris, Yomli Devala Chaba, and Nilaya Chaba, or Dindi Yungioris.
Since we often quote Chandrakirti's supplement to the Milway, the 3rd verse from the 1st chapter in Chandrakirti's text says, "Homage to that compassion for migrators who are powerless like a bucket traveling in a well, through initially adhering to a self, an I, and then generating attachment for things, this is mine." So this 3rd verse from the 1st chapter of the supplement to the Milway explains the process by which again and again we are born in cyclic existence. First of all, with ignorance of grasping, ignorance is called the view of the perishing collection. grasping at I, and through that generating attachment to things, this is mine. Through that performing actions that again and again cause us to take a birth in cyclic existence and thereby to experience suffering. Not understanding this process, also not understanding the way that this ignorance can be seized, we do nothing about breaking free from cyclic existence. We do not become enthused about breaking free from cyclic existence on account of not understanding the mechanism that keeps us going in cyclic existence and not understanding how this mechanism can be broken down.
That indeed, that in the that hundred pongores, even cheddar pongitsulenis, say the naming some lelo pamon, say chimney donga some lelo pambo. Tambo sin di naming some lelo pambala soup, some near to chiri jumba, pay shepatan, Rani and chivi shaman to curie, long year chamaron watan. Gava la mambena dongna di dongiwa. Sambavas, tambo near to chivin jumbe peshabalini. Chivin jumbo also in Tonta, te peshabal. Tambo chivin jumbo also in Tony. Numu Gavi Shonini, Gava Jani Chukuni. Chida Kano Sungiva, Jeditano Mishisams.
Since first off, we looked at the causes of laziness and abandoning them, those three causes of laziness, of indolence, let's look at a way to abandon them. And a few points to that section: abandoning laziness by reflecting on the disadvantages of it in this life, and then abandoning the laziness by reflecting on the disadvantages of it in future lives. Now, when we begin with abandoning laziness by reflecting on the disadvantages of it in this life, there are 3 points. Explaining by means of an analogy that death will soon cause this body to perish. As even you yourself are under the dominion of death, it is inappropriate to carry on as if you had time, and you will be tormented by suffering if you do not make perseverance in virtue. When we begin with the explanation by means of an analogy that death will soon cause this body to perish, there are 2 points. It is clear to see that death causes this body and life to perish, and explaining that by means of an analogy. First off, let's look at verse 4 that says, "Enmeshed in the snare of disturbing conceptions, you have entered the snare of birth. Why are you still not aware that you have gone into the mouth of the Lord of Death?"
There's that the chiwa ngonsum tong se di chedang chiwa ngonsum di tong chi sam tana chiwa ngonsum di tong nganzu tong tu go ras ina yang nganzu ta chi samlo madang kala ya ani chiwa singi ji dra khowa ina ani minde bi lo chi de chi kanji ani sem la ma shwa chi nganzu mo lu ya ani chiwa de chi ani nganzu chiwa ngeba de ani tu ngeme gi chigi de do la ba na sem na ma shong do ingo ra sra.
So first off, it says here that we fear death. If you were to perceptually see death, this is to say that if death is evidently seen by you, you will have a lesser sense of apprehension of death. That would be if we were to evidently or perceptually see death, but we don't do it. Not only we don't see it directly, just by hearing about death, it makes us unhappy. There's a sense of discomfort that creeps in when we even hear the word death. We don't want to think about it. We can't get a head around it. It seems to be completely incomprehensible that we will die. But then when we But then when we start to think about death, then we see that, first of all, death is certain, but also that the time of death is uncertain, in that sense that we're still under the control of the Mara of death. Then there's a less apprehension of death that we will be subject to.
That deal and Kiamamu shoot yours. Taina so di on the Chiva Samni, on the Chidroyajita, Chiva Masamni, and dead to a chicky, Netanti, Muyan the Chulat Sauni Yomaras, Chick Teres, in the cook, Chiva Yonia di, Muyan Netsuinza, Muyan Netsu di, and it's so similar, and shown to Yachik. Some down to Yaki, Nubajik Tringo does not, yeah.
There's so many faults to not thinking of death. It's not that if you do not think about death, you'll be able to avoid it, whereas only if you think of death, death will come to pass. It's not like that at all, is it? In reality, whether we get a head around it or not, we will certainly die.
Namji Chame imbati, Muyu di imbati, Nanzu Sam Tubaina, Gensin Kariabatan, this Samatuna, Kyan Kariabachi, Kyun Kariabachi, Ton Tubaina, and Shiva Sambi Lodi, and Teondini, Sozolia, Pentoyabachi, Yunguyasares.
Not only death is inevitable, but also the time of death is uncertain. So if you think of the uncertainty of the time of death, you'll get some benefit. There's a fault in not thinking of the point that death is, that the time of death is uncertain. So this is the second thing that we need to consider in relation to death, that the time of death is uncertain.
And Chingin Delia, Rigmam Shuj, Sogden, Maimbi, then Dushi, the Rigmam Shujoras. That's Pena Shindon la Soba, Metal la Soba, Ditsu, any Chivaina, any Chivaran mother, and Koyanga, and Sukiava Lambato, Tidi, Kiomaras. The ones Mitch said, Ludan Semnivodi, and cut out some remodel. Said Delayaji, and Mission Lenshabi, Lens like those, Lenshabi, Ludi, and the cut out some, and the Shivashagoras. That did the looted the cut out some, and it's so chick, and it Kaya, they do Kaya Noamevachik, and the Tolaya, and it Droshavi Yoris, no, that the Drovio Maris. Nonzi Yanga Pin, that you give us temple so Tinji on Soundama, Yanga Kios Lengu Yavadi, and Pessi which Agoras.
There are different things that die. There are different things that possess life that die. Like, for example, even plants and trees and so forth can die. They die, but it's not that they go on and take another rebirth. But when we die, we go on and take another rebirth. And when we look at the meaning of death from a Buddhist perspective, we currently have a combination of body and mind. We consider this body as a body that we have taken in a certain process. And the time of death is the separation between the body and mind. This is what we consider to be death from a Buddhist perspective, the separation of body and mind. So is it that upon death, the separation of body and mind, we will be free from all pleasure or all pain? It's not that just upon the separation of body and mind, happiness or pleasure and pain will cease to exist. We go again and again through a cycle in which we are born in cyclic existence. We take a rebirth in cyclic existence, and therefore simply separating between this body and mind does not mean to say that this process will come to an end, because we again and again come together with a new body, take a new body, and we are born, and then at the end we die. So that's what happens to us as living beings within samsara. Jace?
That's what we're talking about here. The death of the inherent I.
Is the death that we're speaking about here is the death of the mere I.
The inherent I.
The inherent I. Kabdila chiwa se dila ranshingi drubegi dak chiwa lalla girbes sushi gires.
Could the Chivati Lago Ranching tribute that killing us? Ranching tribute that never is a cup the Cho Yobajalia. Cho Yobajalia, Munzi Chigonza, and Ranching tribute that Kavajani Shivio Maris.
An inherently existing I doesn't exist, but death does exist. So then when we think of what is the thing that dies if death exists, it cannot be an inherently existing I. So the conventionally existing I, or the mere I, is the one that dies.
Yeah.
You're referring to the separation of mind and body. So there must be a period of time between when the mind enters another body, and that period of time would be void of happiness or suffering, or it would be. I don't know.
All right, so we spoke about death as being the separation between the body and mind. So there must be a period between the separation of body and mind in this life and the time in which the mind comes together with another body in future life. So then in that period in between, is there void? Is there no experience of pleasure or pain? Yeah. Dila que si chiwa se di lutan sem kata di dagaran shawa inarwa. Ni kewa chimala sem di lu lembaina. Di parula yan parton chi sha gogerbes. Di kuram bardo den de layo marine. Parton de chi sha gogerbes. Ani que si shawa ina bardo capsula yan dedu nyo yerbes nyo yamares.
Tell Yabedos, Dito Topados. In a Nansugi Lulaya Tarama Shidos, Lu Rabadi, Nantachi Shada the tribute, Kanjipami Kuda the tribute, and Lu Rabaris. The deal Tavi and P. Casso. Long-some Zamslam, Choco Giri, and the Digic Luchiki, Lutawatations.
It's a good question. When we, first of all, consider what a body is, we can recognize that there are different types of bodies and they have different degrees of subtleties. Like, for example, the body that we have now, this one, the physical body, is a body of flesh and blood that we acquired through a certain process from our parents, right? So it came from the sperm and ovum of our parents. So this is a coarse body. But then there's another body that is more subtle. This body that is more subtle is spoken of in terms of the body of the wind energy in relation to the combination of mind and wind and mind. So we have this thing that is called wind, or the wind energy. And a body that is made of this wind energy is considered to be more subtle.
Tinza Nandu Lu Raban Dil Ne Katavatan, Lu Shinji Lambadi, Tunyum Shagores. Lu Tamut Segorata, Lu Tamaji, Lu Shambaji Lambadi Tunyumres. Tinyamres, Tiparalaya, Lu Manamba Partonchi Yomares, Lu de Katavada, Lu Shenji Lamati, and Tinyamres.
So then when we think of what occurs in that period, which is called the intermediate state, between the separation of body and mind in this life and the joining with another body in future life, what happens in that period in between is that upon the separation of body and mind, discourse, body from our mind, at that very time, simultaneously, there is an acquiring of a subtle body, right? So it occurs at the same time. So it's not so strictly speaking, it's not a period in which there is no body whatsoever. There is a separation from the coarse body, but at that time, there is coming together with a subtle body. So the subtle body belongs to a state that is called the Bardo state. The Bardo. That's a word in Tibetan, the Bardo, and it means the intermediate state. So there's the body of the intermediate state being. And this body is a subtle body, and it's still subject to pain and pleasure, or to happiness and suffering.
Tere takanji tinza the ludan semni and cut that you cut telling you kalaya and nganzu tandi kalaya and ji tandi kalaya nganzu chewa tenwandi chewa sambaina ji ngi and putu the cutter sound of the niname the cutter sound of the ji juchala manguj ladru so Tindi dunga samato ngandu tontuya maras. Tan ngone tani pigi and chivala niwe kalaya chi lugu ombotuzu manyamchi du levi kadula and kewa chima pigi and kene kali kiwi na digi and chi nganda dawchik and sonan drama legend dunga shudni yungu yasaris ro.
There are sufferings that are associated with getting closer and closer to the actual death. Currently, when we think of death, what often happens to us is that we are overcome by fear, thinking that when death comes, I will be separated from the things that are dear to my heart. I will be separated from my partner, from my family members, from my kids, and so forth, and fear arises in our mind. I will be separated from the things that I have accumulated throughout my life, things that have a certain value to me, that are precious to me. And when we think about it, fear arises in our mind. But then, Geshe reckons that in the process of dying, as you're getting closer and closer to the moment of death, in which the body and mind start to break down, the coarse level of consciousness dissipate and more subtle levels of consciousness appear. There are other types of suffering that come up which we don't think about at the moment, but certainly there are states of suffering that trouble the mind as we undergo the process of dying.
Sam give up the way drink master sami give the tender legios. That didn't that Namrad, Duma Shuch Tony, and on the Sephio, Netanchi, Chick Chatter, what is.
And in the process, it could be that we reflect upon the things that we have done throughout our life. And we might think that I have done so many things that which are inappropriate. I have not lived a good life or a meaningful life. And it is possible that when we reflect upon all the inappropriate things that we've done throughout our life, that we will die with a deep sense of regret for that. It is possible that that will happen.
Di da ka materni drosachi zawni yomares pilaya and duvi tama trawa jigding chunis kiwi tama chewa jigding chunis because ani chunira tilaya nganzugi ngamda da dunga chebaina ani goden zawni mejo chilaya ta nganzu 고마시비 왕기 동아디 제셔도 걸었어.
So first off, with respect to the fear of having to be separated from those who are dear to our heart, our family members, our partner, our children, our brothers and sisters, and so forth. It's not that we can go somewhere and completely avoid the point of separation. It's impossible to avoid being separated from those who are dear to our heart. It will certainly happen. As it is stated in some Buddhist texts, upon every meeting, there will be separation. Every birth will end in death. That is something that cannot be avoided.
Tenza tamban nga zungu yun de sam tuwa da kimi tamale chiwa ta dibi tama trawa yibati sem dini ngeba nyechin yoba ina ani delia peshe dunga di peshu chondro wasales ra peshu chondro wasales.
So when we start to think about it, and we think that whatever comes together will certainly separate or disperse at the end. Whatever is produced will disappear or will separate at the end. If we think about it and then become convinced that this indeed is the case, we can certainly make the pain of death, when that moment will come, the moment of separation, we can certainly make that pain of death become weakened.
Ondiri inza di dunga di nganzo tiang pi ani metawa imba samba keji ni nyu ranshin imba samba di tone dunga diang setu gores ta ani chiga gamole ya ani namra dunga diang nganzo tandani ani dinji gi kaso ta samu jiya baina ta di kalaya ani jikta mugu big tapsh your mari said there is right.
So we can certainly reduce the suffering that we will experience when we think of having to be separated from those who are dear to our heart. So we think about death and impermanence in that every moment that passes is getting us closer and closer to the time of death. Not only we're drawing nearer and nearer to the time of death, also at the time of death, nothing will be of help. So then if we think about it, Geshe reckons that if we think about it, if we acquaint our mind with that, certainly there's a way of reducing the fear and the anxiety that are associated with the process of dying.
Tira dapena anchi soju tsendele ya ani marabshu cheja yuti digwa cheja yuti chega lamne gebo yadi dandan ni marab chedi digwa masawa na digwa sa in tapesa sami gebadi yung kor marwas ta di mayu itolaya ani dig dosho ani geba cheyo bana ti ani tobgi ani geba chima ani dendrol kiyati yungu yores tinza ani cheo matawa samni cheo matawa pigi tsendigi ani nyemik sambala teni ani kewa chima tenya buchi yungya ani chigangamola ya ani jigda mugo ya samalo ani tsendigi nyemik sambala teni yungu yores right.
So then when we think of death, getting closer to the moment of death, in which we think of all the negativities, all the non-virtuous actions that we have done in our life, and we would feel a deep sense of regret for having lived a life in that way. There's a way of avoiding that or reducing that if we remind ourselves of that fact throughout our life. So that we will remind ourselves that there will come a time in which we will die, and dying with a sense of regret or a sense of fear for having done all those negative actions before is not what we want to have or do. But just to fear dying like that is not enough. Just to fear dying with a sense of regret is not enough. If you then think of avoiding negativities, overcoming negativities by performing virtues, you think about it in terms of not only not only avoiding a sense of dying with a sense of regret, but also taking those actions that will lead you again to a pleasant state of existence or a high state of existence in your next lifetime on account of performing virtuous actions. So not only you reduce your apprehension of death or dying with regret, but also you have a better confidence, better certainty that you have done well in this life, that you have done those things that will secure a good or pleasant state of rebirth in your next lifetime. And this is the point of reflecting on death and impermanence. If we reflect upon death and impermanence, recognize that death is one of the disadvantages of cyclic existence. And we're going to develop regret for having done negative actions, counteract those negative actions by taking up virtuous actions. We'll experience less pain or less fear because we know that we have something that can be done, or we have done something that can be done in order to avoid miserable states of existence in samsara. That's the point of thinking of death and impermanence.
What's the difference between the heroines within Buddhism and other spiritual circles of the death of the ego or the I? It seems like there's difference between what Geshe was talking about. It seems like the death of the ego of the I is like like a core thing going, but there's still a subtle thing, subtle graph thing still there.
So you're asking what's the differences between Buddhism and other traditions in terms of the understanding of the death of the I or the death of the ego? So is there a difference in terms of subtlety? And that is are you asking if in the Buddhist tradition, when we understand what the I is that dies, is there a more subtle understanding of who is that I that dies, whereas in other traditions there's not that understanding? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, it seems like what Geshe was talking about, the realization of death is different from what other people say would be synonymous with ego death.
I haven't heard that term before, ego death. So I'm wondering what is the meaning of ego death? I mean, in comparison to just dying, is it a difference or?
That's my question. I'm not sure now.
The thing is that to translate that term ego death, I'm not sure what it means in English, so I don't know how to translate that.
It means the equivalent of, in our position of a core side, the negation of core side.
Okay, so ego death would be in the Buddhist tradition the negation of the cause I.
Yes.
Quran the chua this several in a chua condition sadesina tadila dila dag dila thalak mindayo ro chazang ngaso number chula dak chiwa se dila dak rakala lagirve thamola lagirve chidan chena zabulin chawa dila chiwa se di zabulin chawa chia se di chiwa dak rakala shagirve thamola shagirve chikpa shagirve
Nanzu dalaya tanyin dibi da chigdan gashi da ni chigoras yan tambo chiotia di gachoni ranjin chibi da se di gashi da ton chigoras ani yang nanzu tanyin dibi da se di dedu nyo poch ro ni nga dewu ani nga dewu mundu nga kiwu mundu se nga chigoras di yethaksurenos di tani di dadres ra.
So I guess I will connect it with your first question in relation to the self that dies. Is it the inherently existing self and so forth? It seems that there is a connection between those questions. So from a Buddhist perspective, we distinguish between the conventionally existing I and the I that is negated. So there is a certain type of self that is negated, the self that does not exist. And there is a self that is not negated, the one that conventionally exists. So the one that conventionally exists is the self, the I, that experiences something. So I experience happiness and I experience pain. The one that experiences happiness and pain is not an inherently existing I. It is a conventionally existing I.
Tinza dangan chiwa keji shewundi da tani dibi da titon shegoras. Da dela pi moment on tara di chechogres. Chechor dineya kanji thanga ani tara nigalo ani kenchi chigores.
So then in terms of death, the I that dies is that I, the conventionally existing I, the one that has those experiences of pleasure and pain. This is the self that dies. Indeed, you can make some distinctions with respect to a coarse level of self and a subtle level of self. But even if you make such distinctions with respect to the conventionally existing self, both of them die, both of them are born.
Odiri dinza tanamzu kasota chimi dunga samba kewa chimi dunga samba da teni lelong gotsu ani tse digi nyemik sanamudu kanji nganzu ani lu matawa yimba ani lu dunga garanshi yimba di ani tse digi nyemik des tozu tsama lo kasota gyuden kenjila teni jungu yonza gyugenjila teni jungu yoba ani kewa chimi dunga yina gyugenjila teni jungu yoba tian gyugen tso di pena ani tse digi lu dunga garanshi yimba di ani gyugen ani tso chadam mosum ten kewa ngami gyuni yungu yoba kewa chimi dunga tian ani tse digi ani chadam mosum ten megibi lel ten yungu yoba dus chik ngon treba ina ta megibi le cheba chadam gi shawon de doya di ani zamsha goya ji tsamliya gyachi gyadam legir was zamchi masha na da zauni ni yonta mundu sangsongchi di zamchi shamado na ani ngi kewa gyunchin da dunga padu meba yon de yachi mado mundu injimin zamsha gogu du sambigi sangloji da yon gogu ares yungu ares ra mambu yungu ares tadi.
When we connected to the topic of this chapter, which is joyous effort, and first of all, we deal with ridding ourselves of forms of laziness. And the first type of laziness is laziness of indolence. It is related to not thinking of death, not thinking that one day I will die. So in order to avoid that type of laziness, we think of death and impermanence. We think of different points with respect to death and impermanence, the certainty of death, the uncertainty of the time of death, and so forth. We think about it in terms of cause and conditions that contributed to the body that we have in this life and how they also affect our death, and also that we will go on and take another rebirth next life because we're still under the influence of causes and conditions. And when we consider the body that we have in this life that was produced under the influence of causes and conditions, we can understand that because it was produced through certain causes and conditions, it is in the nature of suffering. The process that contributed to the birth in this body, in this life, was controlled by karma and afflictions, afflictive states of mind, the three poisons, anger, attachment, and ignorance. In previous lives, a mind was controlled by these three poisonous afflictions, and also in this life, our mind is controlled by these three poisonous afflictions, under the influence of which we perform actions, non-virtuous actions, that will contribute to suffering in the future. So when we understand that, when we understand the process, we then think that I need to desist from acting in a non-virtuous way, to stop doing virtuous actions. Otherwise, if I do not desist from acting in a non-virtuous way, from this life to the next, from life after life, I will continue to experience suffering. So this way of thinking will naturally arise, will naturally occur to us if we start thinking of death and impermanence and how this body is produced from cause and conditions. Those cause and conditions are involved with afflictions, which cause birth in a body that is the nature of suffering.
어딜 성단다 간지 아니 깨어 치미기 동화 성단 아니 깨어 치미기 동화디 다 용미진지 만사 다디 간다진 까고 토가 성단이 디규 센디 까고야 아니 게디 빵am 미시로왕기 간지 디곤 바시 체데 기 투여바 인자다 디 아니 디까야야 아니 드로잉이지 인자 안 디기다 레롱고야치 야시자다바 용구도 아스로 인지도 sometimes 서레스타 노디도 시나.
So in short, when we think of what this section is saying that it is saying that there is suffering that we'll experience in future life. How do we put a stop to future suffering? If we continue to have that lack of understanding with respect to virtues and negativities, we will not be able to stop future suffering. The way to put a stop to future suffering is to, first of all, come to know what they are, to understand them, and then to actively put a stop to them. So through that, you develop joyous effort in so doing. And without that, you still have laziness of indolence. This is what we need to stop. We need to stop that laziness that is attributed to not understanding suffering, not understanding death, and so forth.
추버균 체다가 칸 깨우 도목을 송은 교와다 드로원 교와 체디 다돈 취지 미시선스 미시선스.
We read through verse 4. Let's look at the commentary of Gerda Marinchin. It says, similar to animals that cannot escape death because they are ensnared in a trap, one has fallen into the trap laid by the hunter, that is, the affliction of laziness, and so forth. Being thus controlled, one is snared by the trap of birth that connects one with the next life, and hence one finds oneself in the mouth of the Lord of Death. How can you still know this? Sorry, how can you still not know this?
인자다 겨울증고스 이거 비셰반데 배통다 디 비셰반이 rambi rimki sebayan kögi ton mangyutam wengen illa tembakan toba tam maheshis.
Therefore, at the end it says, strive in virtue. Now, the next section explains it with an example, by means of an example, which says, he is killing our kind gradually. Do you not see it? Those relying on sleep are like a butcher and a buffalo.
Teredang pena genjon paramos la sobi randi chidagi rimgi sebayang kögi onsum ton magyurtam tedar tongyang yenge nile tempi seba kan batne mirigde pena torbe rimgi sebi mahi shen seba tonya taba meje taba neba toba tan mahi shenons.
The commentary says, do you not see directly that the Lord of Death is killing the old, young, and the middle age of your kind? You see it, and yet you develop craving based on sleep. This is unsuitable. For example, like the buffalo that is seeing directly the butcher is killing sequentially the other buffaloes, and yet he's unworried and abides leisurely.
Dadi nganzu tong de adra genje pharmacist no pen tang nganzu and then it's a bit that you miss Sunji Kong Kavita, Suzu Temple Sudivigi, and Suzu any Kasota, Chotomore, and Namuri, any Yanko, and do some Tamana, that Tandi Chalia, that Mimam Shuchi, on the Timbi Yulia, never Zamato, Kayan Hami to Pemam Boras, that Gab Tidu, and Tharma Pigi. And Kaso such Guyong, Benju Yong, Shu Yong, Wang Yong, so and Tantichalia, Geshe, Korchin, and Susu Pigi, and Kambiganga, Lama to me, Kanji Kayula Tengu, Mission the Tengu, Dini Chatting, Pemambueras, and the Ningi, and Shengi, any Chunjo to the young, Geshe Koting, Nasana, the Dinimamu Shuch, or do down the Takanji. And Shivi Gigi, any Chidaki, the same drug yobadi, one sound of Taman, Monsum to Ton to Gerda.
This is something that we can evidently see around us. For example, when we think of those that we used to know 20 years ago, of the people that we used to know 20 years ago, certainly there are those that are now nothing but an object of memory. Now, no longer with us, the only thing that remains of them is the memory of that person used to exist before. Or there are also those around us that we know that once upon a time they were at the prime of their youth. They were strong, they were healthy, they had resources, they might have been rich, and now they're frail, having to be assisted by others. Maybe they rely upon a walking cane, or maybe they have to rely upon someone else if they need to walk from here to there. And we know that death will be upon them at some point, rather sooner rather than later. Might be someone that is close to a heart, a friend, or a family member. Or we also might have encountered someone in our life that should have died when they were old, but yet they died at the prime of their youth from a sickness or in another condition. This is something that we evidently see.
There is a kanji that Suzuki and J Suzuki kanji Suzuki and Tonde Toson Yobigi and it's Mitsamalodu Sujin and Chitak Kalia Tsuduyona and it's Suzuki Chiguji Tiparalea ha Missiguaras. Meshamba Sukan Hagmena, Suzuha Missiguaras, Pena Pigi, Tachik Shembigi, and Sheranali, Subi, Mahes Nanshin. Rock Chig Mayetsam look, any that get to the sound digi, and that didn't some Susans on the lay, but Jaja Yatamarina, Kunzo, Tundroinza, some dancing maras, some machine, and the children dead edge, but Mayananshi. And dead digging base.
So if that happens to all of those around us, those who are close to our heart, to those people that we know, they die when they are young or at the prime of their life or when they get old. Why are we under the impression that it will not happen to us, as if everyone will die and we will be the only ones left standing? Of course, one day it will happen to us as well. It is like, as Shantideva says here, it is like a buffalo that watches its mates being led to the butcher, and still they remain idle, or they have that leisurely behavior. We behave in the same way. We see people around us die, and yet we still have that leisurely state of mind and not fearing death, not thinking that one day will occur to us. Shall we leave it here for now? Just a second. There it is. All right. Gewadi Nudula Lama Sange Drugyune Doa Chikamalupa De Salagopa Sho Chanchu Sancho Rinpoche Make Pana Kegyuchi Kewa Nyamba Mepaya Gone Gondo Pewa Sho Kangri Rawe Kowe Shinkanto Pendan Dewa Malu Juwene Chenre Siwan Tenzin Gyatsoe Shape Site Padu Tengyuchi Tu Tsu Chan Chin Jang Gung Gya Wei Ten Zi Pyong Pe Wei Pung Tsu Do Po Tse Sho Sun Ko Wei Le Mon Tu Tru Pa Da So Du Shin Kung Du Sha Ten Sho 캐디님 계시나면서
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
kind of 근데 가산데 보사데 그
Need to solve that.